Alright, so step 4 is after you've made those connections and filled in the details, you want to compress information. So what we want to do is find ways to group information into smaller chunks through pictures, mnemonics, or other memory tricks. The other thing that we want to do is we want to try to use as few words as possible to hook onto a piece of information that we need. And I'll explain what I mean by that. So, as of this point, you should have notes for the entire chapter. And I would recommend that you actually take the time to do that to practice. So you will have written all the main ideas, and then you will have filled in enough details so that you understand what those main ideas are and what the terms of the bold words mean. So, now let's talk about how to compress that information. So, I'm going to go back to my sheet, and I have some of the examples written on my sheet here. And I'm going to try to put the information that I have on my notes into one page. I want to try to have about one page for each chapter. And this is what I'm going to do that. I'm going to go back to my chapter summary. And I'm basically going to copy the chapter summary. And in that chapter summary, what I'm going to do is try to use as few words possible to explain. So for example, this first part where it says, evolution is the overarching theme of biology. It accounts for the unity and diversity of life and also for the match of organisms to their environment. I'm going to write that like this. Evolution is the main theme. Explains unity and diversity and how organisms adapt to their environment. Alright, so how do I make that smaller so that I can basically let it use less space in my brain to really understand it? Well, I can do it like this. I could write evolution, theme, unity and diversity, organism matched to environment. And when I do that, I've now taken that same information and I've cut it to be smaller amounts, and that's what you want to do. You want to go through your main list of information where you've gotten the bold words, you've gotten the main ideas, and you've gotten enough detail so that you can understand, and you want to rewrite it in as few words as possible to get those main ideas. That's what your goal is. To compress that information as much as you possibly can. Alright, so that's rule number 4, to compress information. Let's talk about rule number 5. Rule number 5 we really started to do already, and rule number 5 is that you need to write. Now people learn better in different ways. Some people like to see pictures, some people like to recite things, kind of hear themselves talk it out, but writing is a way that connects the information with your brain in a way that works for a lot of people. So what you want to do is link ideas together. So let's have a look at this. Here's an idea of how you might do that. We're talking about evolution, right? So I'm going to try to connect this with something else that we've been talking about. So in the properties of life, see how there's that key part about evolutionary adaptation? So that means that evolution relates to the property of life, evolutionary adaptation. Now, I also wrote earlier that the property of growth and development information's inherited by genes, and what I read about evolution is that that's part of it. So evolution's also connected to the property of growth and development. I know that it's connected to reproduction. Well, why is it connected to reproduction? Well, if you're inheriting, that involves reproducing offspring, right? So that's part of that. So that's kind of the idea. I want to make now connections between the information of one area and information of another area. Here's another example. One of the things we talked about earlier was biology. And biology is the definition, the scientific study of life. Well, a little bit later in the chapter, it talks about that scientists use two main ways to study. It says that the two ways are hypothesis-based and discovery science. Now, what we would consider to be scientists today use hypothesis-based science. But discovery science is sort of the preliminary basis of that. So, if I know that biology is the scientific study of life, I can write that there's two different ways to study. I can write that there's discovery science, and when I look at the chapter, there's also hypothesis science. And when I go back and look at this part in the chapter, it says that discovery science uses inductive reasoning. So back over here, I'm going to put inductive reasoning, and I would probably add enough information so that I knew what inductive reasoning was. And hypothesis uses deductive reasoning. So now I've connected, again, one part of the text to two other parts. I'd also probably need to know the differences between these two. So that's what I'm going to be doing next.